So I just wanted to thank M&G New South Wales for kind of taking this opportunity for me just mentioning mediation, and also to Artspace and to Rachel's team who have organised this, and to Marion for coming all the way from Paris. And thank you to all of the host venues that are here. And we have Nikki as well from UQ, who is one of the co-commissioners, which is great. So I'll just go to here. You've seen this image, so I might start here. So I'm just going to pick up on one kind of aspect of my practice rather than going over everything, but something that's really key to my work is research. And I think mediation is actually the follow-through on that. And so when I first started exhibiting in France, this became this element that I hadn't worked with before previously. And really at the Palais de Tokyo was the pinnacle of that. And so with all of my works, I use research as a way to understand previous works or the project that I'm working on at the time. So I'll just take you back to Biennale of Sydney. I presented a durational performance that was 7 days a week. It was really looking at endurance and the body. It did touch on elements of ritual. Really, I can say it touched on things. I didn't actually understand everything it was touching on. But one thing that became apparent towards the end of the project is that the group itself had evolved, they'd changed, and that they were coming off the actual performance work really, really hyped and elevated. And I couldn't exactly explain why that was happening. Actually, I couldn't explain it at all. So once I got back to Paris, I kind of delved into trying to find that out. So I thought maybe it's something to do with neuroscience or something to do with chemicals, or I had no idea. And yeah, I remember actually being exactly at my studio and becoming really frustrated because I couldn't find anything. And then I found the work of Felicitas Goodman, and she was an anthropologist and linguist, like Marion told you. And she was working in the 70s, and some of her most important research was in the 80s. And being an anthropologist and linguist meant that she was quite plastic in the way that she was practicing her work. So that really got me. And I'd found some of her it was called trance dance, actually, but it was a work that was presented at NYU as part of Richard Sechner's performance conference. And Richard Sechner developed the first performance studies program, and he worked with another performance theorist that I work with a lot, Victor Turner. And in there was this trance dance workshop, and I read as part of that Felicitas, before she passed away, said, I can really see my work continuing in neuroscience, theology, and particularly performance, but no one's worked with it yet. And so it gave me that opportunity to think that as part of this exhibition that I'd already been invited to do, I could kind of further that and actually put into practice this wish that she had. I'd already started a film, which was called Dangerous on the Way. I filmed it in Borneo. And really it was a research project to start with, because it was a group of, an indigenous group called the Orang Sungai, and they were collecting birds' nests at the top of 120-metre high ladders. And I had this feeling that what they were doing was not just about labour, that it was something to do that must be sacred. And it felt like these what I was reading of Felicitas Goodman, actually perhaps I could go and see that on the field and actually look at key elements. She had done 488 ethnographic studies of indigenous groups performing ecstatic trance, and she had key elements of how to achieve trance. There were 6 of them. And so I thought, well, I can go there and actually witness this and see it. And I'd just like to acknowledge as well the Australia Council, because an artist like me with my practice, research is essential. It's really the beginning of the artwork, it is the artwork. And so having the support of the Australian Council has always meant that I can work for something like 2 years, really, and I can start the process of that research without having to have a venue to start with. Really gives me that chance to understand the work. And so I went to Borneo with my husband. I took cameras, but I didn't know if I'd be able to film. I didn't know if I could make contact as well with the group, and I just didn't have that pressure to start with, which is so fortunate. And so I did make contact, and actually everything went wrong. And in going wrong, they felt really sorry for me, and then I was given this opportunity. And so I was able to shoot the film, develop it, and then I had this great experience where Palais de Tokyo got behind the project, and an incredible benefactor asked what I needed, and I needed a new lens. So I was able to go back a second year and really embed myself in the practice. And at that point, they invited me to actually work with them in this very scary situation. And so all of this research started working with anthropologists, and then I started working with Sabine Rittner, who Artspace has really facilitated in bringing her here so that she could teach my performers. And that was likewise with Palais. They brought the directors of the Koyamungi Institute, who's the institute that continued the work of Felicitas in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So they came to the Palais de Tokyo, and they taught, I think, 70 of us. Were you at that workshop? That was crazy. And I was really scared as well, because I'd done all of this research, but I didn't actually know if it worked or not. So, but it did, and it was okay. So it's really, I think, this element of research and the way that the institutions kind of get behind the project is so unique, because in the case of this exhibition and that one, to invite the people that I worked with to better understand my work, but it meant that they could share it with participants, such as the performers, and also with the institution itself. And because of that connection, it means that these kind of follow-on, I suppose, projects around that can happen. And in the case with Marion, you extended that knowledge and that connection. So I can just go into my experience specifically with you, I think. We had our initial meeting, and it was the whole group, and I just expected that it would be me saying a few things like I've just said to you, but you all took my books. Do you remember? Yeah, so all my books with kind of, I'm sure, really bad notes in there and everything. But it was just that level of commitment that really, made a huge impression on me. And I'd been working with mediators in different institutions. I was always so impressed that they wanted to know so much about the work, but I didn't actually see how that was put into practice at that stage. I understood, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that the practice really creates a connection between the artist and the audience that otherwise doesn't happen. That the practice of the artist is understood in quite a depth and a richness that normally also isn't present there. And but I really hadn't seen what was done with that until we worked together. So Marion and her team included me greatly. I mean, of course, it was a unique situation in that I live in the city as well. But yeah, for me, my practice doesn't really end with the work, and then I love to be part of the process that continues after. So mediation was the perfect situation. And so apart from us doing several programs with the high school, where Marion and I both were teaching them, and then we also worked with the hearing and sight impaired students, which I think was probably one of the most profound moments in my practice, which I didn't expect to come across either. So I was on a tour with another group and walked into this incredible situation. So I can't imagine how many other amazing things you were doing during that period. And it did help me better understand my work because, well, there was one thing. I was using this ritual practice in a museum setting. Part of that ritual practice and the steps involved, you had to choose a sacred space. And I see that the museum or an institution is a sacred space. And so Sabine Rittner, who's here at the moment, and we kind of talked about how in a clinical setting this trance induction can work. But one unknown was, well, what do we do when it goes into the public, and rather than an intimate space or a kind of more scientific setting, how will it work? And so this was a perfect example of that. I thought it was just about audience and this putting it into a public space, but it was also about, really important for me, all of my sculptures are tools, so they help. Yeah, I don't know how to articulate that, but they need to have some type of function beyond just the work itself. And so one part of that was this stage, and the stage itself vibrated, and the room vibrated, which of course immediately affected the hearing and sight impaired students. And so their experience was amplified in a way, which was beautiful. That's really what I can say about our experience together. But it was a really giving, and it really experienced, and it added to my perception of my practice. So it was something that when Rachel and I first met, we talked about, because of course when you're dealing with performers, multiple performers, in the case of Palais we had 45, and you need to have this engagement with them, and I suppose the work evolves over 3 months, especially with something like, we did 6 days a week, multiple performances a day. And we talked about how do we do that, how do we extend that situation with performers, how will that work in the touring venues, how can we add to this experience. So this is where we got to, and Rachel incredibly organised this event. Okay, thank you.